MEREDA's mission is to promote an environment for responsible development and ownership in Maine, and our advocacy work provides our members with great value. We have created a strong voice for the advocacy for real estate in Augusta, which is driven by a very active public policy committee made up of many members who contribute to MEREDA's legislative efforts, with Mike Lane from Freddie Flaherty as our chair. Our public policy committee is fortunate to have first-rate representation led by Andrea Cianchette, our next speaker from Pierce Atwood. We have her Twitter handle on the screen, and her bio is in your conference materials, as we'll do for all speakers throughout the day. Andrea is an attorney at Pierce Atwood and MEREDA's Public Policy Council. Since Andrea joined us 8 years ago, and even before that, MEREDA has consistently passed legislation that improves real estate development in Maine. In this current session, MEREDA will work to repeal a non-residential and difficult disclosure requirement, to create an open dialogue with the new commissioner's staff at the Maine DEP, and to work to resolve concerns related to the Maine Uniform Business and Energy Code. I chaired the MEREDA's Public Policy Committee for many years and spent a lot of time walking around the halls in Augusta with MEREDA, and I can tell you we're all well served by virtue of your membership. I think Andrea represents all of us in Augusta. When I walk down the halls and say, "This is my lawyer," it just feels great to have Andrea, somebody so capable in the legislative field. So Andrea, please come up.
So it's my job to set the stage for the public policy agenda and the work that we're going to be doing in Augusta this year for MEREDA. I think I'll start by saying that in the State House there is a mood and a wave of cautious optimism that some things will happen in Maine that haven't been able to happen over the last 8 years. That, of course, is coming from the Democratic part of the legislature and the governor's office. I think among Republicans there's a lot of concern, fear, and skepticism about what will the Democrats do with all this power that they've taken by getting the majorities in the House and the Senate and the governor's office. And I know there are Democratic leadership who are saying to their caucus, we cannot squander this opportunity. We need to be responsible. Governor Mills has said that she doesn't intend to raise income taxes. We'll see. I think a lot's ahead of us to see how this is all going to play out, but there is a sense, even among some Republicans, that the bipartisan gridlock may be over to a large degree, and that some of the bigger problems in Maine can be addressed in a way that they haven't been able to in the past. I want to ground the presentation in, I went too fast. So my screen still has me on the header, and the slide up there is not where I want to be. Here we go. Here we go. Thank you. Gary pretty much reviewed this slide. We have our Public Policy Committee. One thing I will mention about that is the participants on that committee come from the diverse range of your membership. So we have architects, engineers, lawyers, realtors, affordable housing advocates, historic preservation advocates, sitting around a room, which gives us a real diverse group of people to analyze legislation and decide what our agenda going forward will be. And I think that's part of the strength of this organization that we can then represent on your behalf in Augusta. We have our mission. Within the public policy work, we always work to promote a more fair, more predictable, and practical policy environment. Those are our guidelines as we assess legislation and decide what we're going to take action on. So in November, we elected a new legislature. As I mentioned, we have a majority of Democrats in the House. That was the same last year and prior years. We also had a majority now of Democrats in the Senate. It was a pretty big sweep. So last year, the Republicans had the Senate by a vote. This year, the Democrats have it by 7 votes. At the same time, there are some checks in the system, though, because to get 2/3 votes, which are necessary for emergency bills, and usually the budget is passed as an emergency bill, they're going to need to have 101 votes in the House, so you need to bring the Republicans into the conversations, and you need 24 votes in the Senate. So again, Republicans will be needed in those conversations. On December 5th, the new legislature convened. They were sworn in and they elected their leadership. Sarah Gideon remains the Speaker of the House. She's in her 4th consecutive term, so she's termed out after this term. She has new assistant leaders, Majority Leader Matt Moonen here from Portland and Ryan Fecteau from Biddeford. Minority leadership changed quite a bit. Ken Fredette termed out of the legislature or of the House. So Kathleen Dillingham from Western Maine is now the leader of the House Republicans and supported by Trey Stewart from Presque Isle. Over on the Senate side, Troy Jackson, who is also from Aroostook County, is the president of the Senate. He's supported by Nate Libby, from whom you'll hear about in a little bit this morning because he's getting a nice award from us, and Eloise Vitelli from Saginaw County. Dana Dow is the Republican lead in the Senate. He was the chair of the Taxation Committee. We will miss him on that committee, but he'll be helpful to us in the Senate in his leadership position. And Jeff Timberlake, who served on the Appropriations Committee, is now, as a House member, is now in the Senate and the assistant minority leader there. On that same day, they elected the 3 constitutional officers that you see up here. Aaron Fry did not get sworn into his Bangor seat that he served. He was elected into the legislature. He didn't get sworn in. He became the Attorney General. Matt Dunlap was re-elected to Secretary of State. This is his final consecutive term. This is his 4th consecutive term, so he'll be termed out of that position in 2 years. And Henry Beck, a former Democrat legislator, attorney from Waterville, is now our state treasurer. That's the 3rd floor. Those are the cross-office building constitutional officers. And then on the 2nd floor of the State House is the governor and her cabinet. So she has nominated all her cabinet positions but the Commissioner of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. I think that one she's finding really tough to find the right person. I know she's been working hard on it. I know she's interviewed a lot of good and capable people, but she hasn't found exactly what she wants yet that I'm aware of. I expect it will be announced fairly soon because I know she's working hard on it. These other candidates that she's nominated, some of them are repeats. So she kept Pat Kelleher with the Department of Marine Resources. She kept Ann Head at the Professional and Financial Regulation Department. She brought Laura Fortman back to be Commissioner of Labor. Laura was Commissioner under Baldacci. And then a lot of these other people are people who have been working in the state agencies, and she sort of pulled them up and promoted them to a commissioner position. She didn't use commissioner positions to be her political payback for any favors that might have been, given to her during her campaign, which is sometimes what's happened. She's really looked for competent people who have substantive knowledge in the subject matter of their agency and people who have experience in state agency. Pender Macon, who has been nominated for education, is probably the one with the least state agency experience, but she'll be surrounded by people who have that. So Janet has put her cabinet together in fairly short order. I know that their nominations will be up for confirmation pretty much before the end of the month, and then she'll have her cabinet in place. Many of them are in their acting commissioner role today, even as we're waiting for the confirmations. So, new administration, new legislature, new opportunities, or new opportunities for mischief, we might say. The mystery box on this slide is that little star on the upper right-hand corner. That's the 2,041 bills submitted so far. So that's a lot of bills. And so far, we have only seen the titles to those bills, other than the 130 or so that have been printed. So we don't know what's in this mystery box yet, other than what the title might suggest is there. But as you know, the devil is always in the details of what's in the language of legislation. So we will be reviewing those every day as they get printed, and we keep our database at MEREDA of bills that may be of impact to us to determine how we're going to respond to those. Jerry Reed has been nominated to be the commissioner of the DEP. He's coming out of the Assistant Attorney General's office and has been advising the folks over at DEP for years. I think it's since 2007 in his role there. So as he comes in as commissioner, we've had, as Gary mentioned in the opening remarks, we have a team of folks working with the DEP staff to talk about what are ways that we can advance regulations, streamline them, improve the process so that we can get permits faster, there aren't as many roadblocks to getting them, et cetera. So we expect those dialogues will continue and maybe result in either changed regulations or laws next year, doing the homework on that and the groundwork on that this year. Also, that might be of great interest to MEREDA will be bonds. We anticipate that there are a number of bond titles in the legislature now, and that this governor will be interested in getting bonds out onto the street. So they could be in the forms of additional affordable and senior housing bonds. Coastal erosion is in there, some workforce development bonds, infrastructure bonds. I do think we're going to see a lot of activity around broadband and improving access to high-speed broadband throughout rural Maine, probably supported by a bond. That would be a prediction that I'd make. And then on the workforce, I think the commissioners and the governor know that workforce is a big problem for us moving forward. I had a meeting yesterday with Heather Johnson, who is the acting commissioner of economic and community development until she's confirmed. She told me she's been meeting with the other two commissioners listed here, Laura Fortman and Pender Macon, so that together they can create some strategies that are cohesive, comprehensive, to help improve the workforce, to increase the attraction and retention of workforce for Maine. In the bills listed are titles. There are some apprenticeship bills, student debt reduction bills to use as an attraction strategy to bring students who have either obviously college educated, they have the college debt, let's bring them to Maine, help them pay off that debt, and have them here working in Maine and use that as an attraction strategy to bring them. Ideas like that will be discussed and developed throughout the session, and I don't know what will land at the end of the session, but I do know workforce development is pretty keen on legislators' minds as well as the governor's, and I know most everybody in this room. Specific to MEREDA, we almost always have a proactive agenda. We have since I joined you in 2011, I guess it was, when the Informed Growth Act was enacted, and since then we continue to put bills in to move things forward for this organization and the types of work that you do. This session in 2019, we're putting in a bill to basically repeal something that slipped by us last year. It was put into a bill that the title didn't suggest it was going to be what it was. It was in a committee we're not typically in front of, and my apologies to you for that. But we're going to try to repeal that this year. It's a law now that requires commercial brokers to disclose the presence of an abandoned or, what do they call it, discontinued road or private easement across or abutting a piece of property that you may be selling. So brokers have had to address that disclosure since it became effective this fall. And we're going to try to get that repealed. You may hear from me to ask me to help communicate to your legislators to accomplish that goal. So more to come on that. We also do advocacy, not just specific to legislation. We've acted on behalf of MEREDA to first try to fight that 3% income tax surcharge for education. That wasn't successful, but we did get it repealed in the following legislature. We also worked in Portland to defeat a troublesome proposed zoning ordinance. We participated in a coalition last year to defeat the referendum on a tax surcharge for home health services. And none of us like to see these referendum coming, but when they come, we do need to take them seriously, and thankfully MEREDA does, along with a lot of other organizations. We've worked on your behalf to try to retain fee increases or contain fee increases. So a couple years ago, there was a huge proposal from DEP to increase the VRAP fee quite significantly, and we negotiated that down to something more manageable and put a cap on those fees. We did the same with a proposal put in by the state fire marshal to increase fees for state fire plan review, and we kept those capped based for a lot lower than what he had originally proposed when he went in. And we'll continue to do that. We'll look at this budget when it gets produced next month very, very carefully to see what provisions might be in there that would impact your businesses, and we'll act accordingly. I mentioned that we'll have this working group with the Department of Environmental Protection. We're doing some educational outreach around MUBEC. And there are also several bill titles in this legislature around MUBEC, and again, till we see the language of them, we don't know what they are, but we are on alert that they're coming. So I just stop by saying, join us in Augusta if you can. MEREDA is having we are taking over the Hall of Flags, which is on the second floor of the State House. It's often where press conferences in the State House happen. You see the photos of the governor and the podium and the stairway up behind her. And what she's looking at is the Hall of Flags when those press conferences happen. And in the Hall of Flags, we'll set up coffee and juice and donuts, and legislators will come by and visit with us. We'll have our notable projects on showcase around so legislators can see the type of work that you all do. And while you're there, in addition to meeting legislators, we're happy to take you up to the Senate, the House. You can watch them in progress. And then if you stay around in the afternoon, you can go into the committees and see how the committees operate. And ideally, we'd have a bill up that day that we could have a public hearing on, and you'd all be in town for it. But I'm not sure I could actually manage that. So the Public Policy Committee meets bi-weekly during the session. We do a legislative report every week, and that reveals the new legislation we've identified that might be of interest to you, and we do our strategizing in those meetings. The other way I would say you could join us is as the session unfolds, if there's a particular piece of legislation that we need help with, by contacting more legislators or having more of us contact the legislators on a committee, we'll be sending out these calls to action to you. Shelley will send them out. You'll see it. It'll be very clearly a call to action. It'll be specific to that one topic. And we would really appreciate you making the call. And that could be an email. It could be a phone call. Oftentimes it's simply leaving a message at a legislative telephone that takes the messages. But the volume of calls, even 10 calls, can make a big difference to a legislator. And we really appreciate it. You have done this for us before, and I expect we'll be asking you to do it again. With that, I'm done. Actually, I'm just getting started.